If you've never opened a retail store, these 3 tips will help you open a profitable store within 1 year. Now, I've been selling clothes over the last 5 years in a retail space. I've opened over 3 retail stores. I've done partnerships with over 50 to 60 brands. And not only that, I've made millions of dollars selling clothes. Now, at the end of this video, you'll have the confidence and know-how to open a successful retail store that is not only profitable, but it's in a great location. Before we get into it, hit the subscribe button to get wonderful content just like this. Number 1, what's your target market fit? Now, what does this mean? Okay, let's say you have a streetwear clothing brand. That demographic is different from a vintage brand, right? Or let's say you take luxury clothing, it's different from thrift clothing. Or rainbow clothing is different from Zara and H&M. So figuring out what type of clothes you're going to sell and being put in that particular demographic. Now, let's say you ever been to a mall and you have the top floor or another floor is dedicated to nothing but luxury clothes, right? They'll have like Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Prada, Miu Miu. The list goes on, right? But the client knows that they're going to go to the luxury place. So if they go into one store, they're a buyer. They're going to go to another complimentary store because that is their frame of reference when shopping. They're a luxury buyer, right? But the buyer that's shopping at Zara, no offense to Zara, is not most likely looking to shop at Louis Vuitton or Gucci. Not saying that they won't shop there or they can't afford there, but that's not in their frame of mind when they're going to the mall for a specific purchase. Let's say they may be going to, let's say their purpose is only to go to a Zara, right? They're like, okay, I'm going to Zara and I'm about to buy me an outfit, right? Now, the other complimentary stores that's next to Zara may be like, let's say, Banana Republic or H&M. Or let's say Levi's store may be there. But in that ballpark range is where there will be another floor at, and that customer can like go into all those different types of stores and sort of select what that person wants. And the same thing with luxury, right? That person can go into Gucci. Maybe they may not find anything they like in Gucci, but they may go into the Louis Vuitton store, and they say, okay, I found something I like, but they didn't have it at the Prada store. These are 2 different types of buyers, right? So another thing is to understand is the pricing of clothing, right? So let's say if you're in a neighborhood where the average income over there is, let's say, $500,000 or $1 million. That's a rich neighborhood. Okay, there are neighborhoods like that in New York City. Then if you're selling, antique luxury goods, then that neighborhood would be good for you. However, if you're selling, thrift clothing that isn't that expensive, let's say the average price point is $10 a piece, then that luxury neighborhood may not be good for you. You may have to go to a neighborhood where the average income is, let's say, $40,000 a year or $30,000 a year, so people can afford to pay for your clothes. So that is what you really got to look at when you analyze different blocks. For instance, I opened a store in Bed-Stuy, and I was next door to a hardware store. Across the street was a hardware store. Then there was a bank not too far away. Then they had next door to me was a streetwear clothing brand who had, Nikes and things like that. And I have a vintage store, right? It's a quaint, posh vintage store, I would say. And and then down the street you had like a KFC, had a Dunkin' Donuts. I was in the wrong neighborhood. I picked the wrong market fit for the type of store that I was selling. Now, had I sold had I had a currency exchange, I could have fit right there. Or if I was in a banking business, I probably could have fit on that particular block. So when you analyze neighborhoods, you really got to see what blocks have similar stores that can complement the type of store that you're going to open. And that by itself will save you a lot of stress, time, and money because you'll be in the right location. Number two, you really want to negotiate a great lease. Now, how do you do this? The first thing you have to do is to hire a lawyer. Do not negotiate a lease, in particular a commercial lease, without a lawyer. The lawyer will help you save time, money, and resources. The thing is also, it's good to hire, even though any lawyer can do this service because they're licensed to do it, you really want to hire or try to hire a lawyer that understands retail leasing very well. If you do that, you'll save even more time, more money. So the second part to this is to always have a good guy clause in every lease. It limits the personal liability that you have for the lease. So for instance, if you sign a lease for 5 years and let's say you want to leave after the first 6 months, you won't be responsible for the full 5 years. You'll only be responsible for the 6 months. Personally though. So if you don't pay back the 6 months of what you're personally liable for, then they can come for your personal assets, your bank account, your house, your car, etc. So whatever personal liability you agree to, make sure something that you can afford. So that's that. Another thing is to try to negotiate for a long-term lease with a personal guarantee in the lease. Now, a long-term lease can be 10 years, 15 years, and the reason why, because it helps to avoid you, it helps you save money down the road in case the rents in that particular neighborhood increase. Because let's say if you have a 5-year lease, and let's say you're paying $5,000 a month, and this is what happened to me. Let's say you're paying $5,000 a month. Let's say you have a 5-year lease. At the end of that 5-year lease, you're like, man, actually, I don't want to leave. I would like to stay here. You go back to the landlord. You say, hey, man, you think I could stay here for another 5 years? I know I was paying $5,000 a month. You think you can keep the rent at that price? And the landlord's going to say, you know what? Actually, you can stay there for another 5 years, but the rent won't be at that price. It's going to be at the market price for that neighborhood. So you're going to hire a broker, they're going to do an analysis, and they're going to say, well, based on my analysis, the rent has increased by double. So let's say if you're paying $5,000 a month, at the end of that, it could increase to $10,000 a month. And you're like, dang, is it really worth it for me to stay here? Well, that's a decision you have to make. But if you have that 10-year lease in place, then you won't have to worry about that. Another thing to consider in your lease is to try to get a sublet agreement. So in case you want to leave the space, you can also sublet the space to another business owner that can afford to pay you the rent and maybe pay you a little bit profit depending on how the market is in that particular neighborhood you're in. And just one last little tip here is please read every sentence of the lease. I know it's a long lease. I know it's a lot of words, but read it. It'll take you, 3 hours to read. Read every sentence so you at least know what's going on in your lease. Number 3, you really want to have a good store experience. With AI coming along, everything is, it's a lot of artificial intelligence out there, right? But the one thing they can't take away from you as being a retailer is optimizing the in-store experience. And the way to do this is to, number 1, have a great floor plan. Have a floor plan that's easy for people to get around in the store. And you also want to have mannequins in there that display different types of outfit that changes as guests come in and out the store. Another thing is, in order to achieve having a great in-store experience, is to merchandise the store often. Best rule of practice is to merchandise at least once every 2 weeks. Some people merchandise once a month. But merchandising your store adds a certain level of freshness to your store. It adds a certain level of sharpness to your store. So by merchandising, it keeps the customer engaged when they come back to your store, from 1 week before to the following week. right? So having that is important. Also, having great customer service is important for a great in-store experience. Every guest that walks in your store, you should always ask them, hello, how are you doing? Do you need any help? You don't want to overwhelm the guests with questions, but you just say, hey, how you doing? If you got any questions, let me know. That is perfect by itself. So I think that by itself, a lot of people undervalue that last part in terms of just speaking to people when they walk into your store, helping people out. But that will make or break your business. And I think that wraps it up. If you like this video, check out my other video right here. I'll talk to you soon. Peace.